Keith Jarrett's life is a story of brilliance, resilience, and complexity. From a child prodigy with an extraordinary gift for music to a world-renowned improvisational pianist who could create breathtaking melodies on the spot, Jarrett's journey is nothing short of remarkable. But behind his genius lies a life filled with challenges, some self-imposed, others beyond his control. How did a boy from a small Pennsylvania town rise to become one of the most celebrated musicians of all time? What drove him to demand absolute silence from his audiences, even if it meant walking off stage? And how did a devastating health crisis nearly silence this musical giant forever? Let's explore the fascinating highs and lows of Keith Jarrett's life. Keith Jarrett was born on May 8, 1945 in Allentown, Pennsylvania, into a family with a rich and diverse heritage. His father, Daniel Jarrett, was Swiss-German descent, while his mother, Irma, was Slovenian. Irma's parents had immigrated to the United States from Slovenia. This diverse ethnic background has led to some confusion and speculation about Jarrett's heritage, with some people mistakenly believing he had African-American roots due to his appearance and musical style. Many listeners and even fellow musicians thought Jarrett was black or biracial, which, in the United States, amounts to about the same thing. Jarrett wore his hair in an afro, although this alone was not what convinced people like saxophonist Ornette Coleman and arranger Quincy Jones that Jarrett was black. It was not uncommon for some white men in the late 1960s and early 1970s to wear their hair puffed out like an afro. In addition, Jarrett was an animated performer. He would twist and turn at the piano, rising off the bench, sliding forward, accenting his playing, and even filling the silences with expressive vocalizations. This combination of factors probably led many of his peers and many in his audiences, especially during the early days of his career, to think that he was black. Keith was the eldest of 5 boys in a strict Christian Scientist household. His parents quickly recognized his extraordinary musical abilities, and by the age of 3, he was already playing melodies on the piano by ear. Imagine a 3-year-old sitting at a piano, his tiny fingers already creating melodies that would amaze adults. His perfect pitch and natural talent were undeniable. Unlike many prodigies who are pushed too hard by their families, Keith's parents took a balanced approach. They nurtured his talent without overwhelming him with expectations. By age 6, Jarrett was already performing full-length piano recitals that included some of his own compositions. His intellectual abilities matched his musical gifts. He tested in the genius range for IQ and skipped 2 grades in school. This meant that at just 6 years old, he was already in 3rd grade. Despite being younger than his classmates, Jarrett excelled academically and even participated in sports. Although Jarrett's early training was rooted in classical music, he discovered jazz as a teenager, and it changed everything. Inspired by artists like Dave Brubeck and Bill Evans, he began exploring improvisation and developing his own style. By age 9, he was performing concerts at prestigious venues like Madison Square Garden. By 12, he was occasionally playing professionally. After graduating from high school in 1963, Jarrett briefly attended Berklee College of Music in Boston, but soon realized he wanted to dive straight into the professional music world. In 1964, he moved to New York City to chase his dream of becoming a jazz musician. For weeks, Jarrett went jobless. In order to get some exposure, he began to show up regularly at a series of Monday jam sessions at the Village Vanguard, one of the oldest and most respected jazz clubs in the city. After some weeks, Jarrett was asked up to finish out the last 5 minutes of a set, a limited time in which to make a mark. Standing at the bar that evening was drummer Art Blakey, a leading figure in jazz at the time. On the strength of 5 minutes of playing, Blakey hired Jarrett on the spot. Jarrett worked with Blakey for a few months, then with Charles Lloyd, and finally with Miles Davis. "It was a funny gig," Jarrett says. "I never rehearsed with the band. Miles just said, 'Come on up and play,' and I did." However, he eventually grew uncomfortable with electric instruments and decided to focus exclusively on acoustic piano, a bold move that would define his career. When Jarrett left Davis after a couple of years, he was a recognized musician. He had been working off and on for some years with a trio, including bassist Charlie Hayden and drummer Paul Motion, and began to record and travel widely. But Jarrett was not yet a major star. By the early 1970s, Jarrett began leading his own group, while also embarking on a solo career that would cement his place as one of history's greatest pianists. In 1971, he partnered with ECM Records. a relationship that would last decades and produce over 60 albums spanning jazz, classical music, and improvisation. ECM not only made Jarrett a crossover star with a huge following in Europe, but also established Jarrett as an American jazz star with a European sensibility. But more than any other single jazz artist, Jarrett legitimized a so-called jazz sound or type of improvisational music that wasn't swing jazz. Probably the single most important figure in the movement of jazz without swing was pianist Bill Evans, whose impact can be traced to one recording, Peace Piece. If there is any single piece of music that could be used as a possible source for Jarrett's solo concerts, it would be Peace Piece. Jarrett also became an icon for something called folk piano, whose leading practitioners were George Winston and Ken Burns' documentary film scorer Jacqueline Schwab. ECM sold and popularized this sound through its hundreds of recordings of musicians, mostly European. Jarrett has commented that his best performances have been when he has had only the slightest notion of what he was going to play at the next moment. He also said that most people don't know what he does, which relates to what Miles Davis said to him, expressing bewilderment as to how Jarrett could play from nothing. One major complaint that has been leveled against Jarrett's improvising is that it is similar, that his music is filled with chunks of funk music, ordinary boogie-woogie, and bits and pieces of popular forms drawn from everywhere, and that we are constantly reminded of the composers of the 19th century. Also that in the more jazzy songs, he sounds occasionally like Dave Brubeck and more frequently like Bill Evans. A second charge leveled against Jarrett is that his music lacks architecture or form. Generally speaking, musical sections are linked. They flow smoothly and logically one from the next. However, with Jarrett's music, there is no overall relationship of the parts to the whole. The pieces do not move in a consistent direction, but wander here and there as Jarrett's imagination dictates. Jarrett's solo piano concerts are the most important and the most popular recordings of his ECM output, and the Colon Concert is the milestone. One of Jarrett's most iconic achievements came in 1975 with the Colon Concert. This groundbreaking album captured an entirely improvised solo performance at an opera house in Cologne, Germany. It has sold about 4 million copies, more than any other recording of solo piano music of any type. But what makes this story unforgettable is what happened before the concert even began. When Jarrett arrived at the venue, he discovered that the piano provided was far from ideal. It was small, out of tune, had sticky keys, and malfunctioning pedals. Frustrated and exhausted after traveling all day without proper rest or food, Jarrett almost canceled the performance. However, after being persuaded by the young concert organizer to go ahead with it anyway, he sat down at the piano, and magic happened. Jarrett improvised around the piano's limitations, creating music so beautiful that it became one of the best-selling solo piano recordings in history. Jarrett's approach to music is obviously based on a personal philosophy. He is, at first impression, shy. Yet behind this visible gentleness is his sense that he is a major artist. He does not admit to having any major musical influences, and finds it difficult to praise competing pianists. Jarrett's sense that he is important and should be treated as if he is, pervaded his musical life. He demanded the full attention of his audience. He preferred not to play in big arenas, nor for standing room audiences who might move around, nor for outdoor concerts where people might bring babies, picnic baskets, wine, and pot. He was notorious for interrupting concerts to deliver diatribes about the inferiority of the piano. A piano technician accompanied him at every concert who would check his piano not only beforehand, but also at intermission. As Jarrett's fame grew, so did his reputation for being uncompromising, sometimes to a fault. He demanded absolute silence during his performances. No coughing, no photographs, no distractions of any kind. If these rules were broken by audience members or photographers, Jarrett wasn't afraid to stop playing or even leave the stage entirely. Over the years, this perfectionism fed a reputation of Jarrett being an unbearable diva. Audiences think I don't like them, but the reality is that I need them more than any other artist alive, says Jarrett, who believes in the sacred nature of a live concert, where the invisible link that unites artist and audience has an impact on the creative work that's taking place. The acoustics, the size of the stage, and of course the model of the piano were also important to him. While some fans admired his dedication to creating an immersive musical experience, others found his behavior overly strict or arrogant. Regardless of public opinion, Jarrett remained steadfast in his belief that silence was essential for him to channel his creativity fully. Despite his professional success, Jarrett faced significant personal challenges throughout his life. In 1996, he was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, which forced him to take a 2-year hiatus from performing, a difficult period for someone whose identity was so closely tied to music. But perhaps the most devastating blow came in 2018, when Jarrett suffered 2 strokes that left him partially paralyzed on his left side. This tragic event effectively ended his performing career, an unimaginable loss for an artist who had spent decades redefining what it meant to play piano. Though Keith Jarrett can no longer perform as he once did due to health issues, his legacy remains untouchable. Over 6 decades of music making have left us with an extraordinary body of work that spans genres and defies categorization. From his improvisational masterpieces to his classical recordings and everything in between, Jarrett has inspired generations of musicians and listeners alike. This is James from One Track Jazz. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this video on the life of the amazing Keith Jarrett, check out these next 2 videos on Bud Powell and Art Tatum.